Hello, everybody. So, you've probably seen a couple of dollar bill portraits up close, and you've probably noticed that they have this similar kind of like series of sort of crisscrossing lines, like curved lines coming around them. The idea here is that these are all done with metal engraving. It's a technique that goes a long way back. Wherein you sort of like create the highlights and the shadows by having the lines crisscross on top of one another. So we're going to achieve a similar effect in Photoshop, and it's a multi-step process. The first thing we're going to do is actually create our lines that we're going to use, and then we're going to find a photo to do this with. So let's go ahead and open up Photoshop, and I'm going to go ahead and just make a new file here. This file is going to be pretty big. We're going to start off with a pretty big file just to, make this look okay. So I'm going to set my document to be 2,000 pixels wide, 2,000 pixels high, and we'll just set the resolution to 72 pixels per inch. So I'm going to agree with that. So our background layer is there. We can just leave that the way it is, and I'll just add a new layer. And we're going to find our line tool. Now, if you don't see what I see right here, I see this little line. If you just hit U on the keyboard, it'll select either the rectangle tool, rounded rectangle tool, ellipse, polygon, line, or custom shape tool. If any of these light up, you just hold the mouse button down on them, and you can find your line tool. So I have my line tool with the following settings. It's set to pixels, so make sure it's not a shape. The mode's normal, the opacity is 100%. I've checked off anti-aliasing, so we'll have that little clean edge going, kind of fading off. It won't be so harsh. And this is important, the weight is going to be set to 1. So with all that, the way it is, let's hold down the Shift key. The Shift key will allow us to draw in a straight line across the top of the page. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get our Move tool, or Select tool here. Move tool, press V on the keyboard. And we're going to hold down the Control and the Shift key and just press down. Actually, before we do that, let's do this. We're going to create a little curving and sort of engraving lines here that are going to give us a little more dynamic, sort of feeling to our lines here. So with this selected, so if you made the duplicate layer here, just go ahead and delete that. Let's go to Filter, Distort, and find Wave. So once again, it's Filter, Distort, and Wave. And these are the settings that I have this at. We want to have our number of generators set to 10. Precisely what that means isn't really important. Wavelength, which is obviously the distance between the peaks of the waves, our minimum and our maximum wave are going to be very similar, not quite the same. The amplitude being the heights of the wave. Minimum is going to be 5, max is going to be 6. Have it scaled to be 100%. Make sure it's set to sine. Make sure it's set to repeat edge pixels. Now press OK. And this will make our line. I'll zoom in a little bit here. Kind of see better what's going on. I'm using a sort of somewhat zoomed in version, so everything's bigger, so it's kind of hard to get quite the same view. But now what we're going to do is with this little wavy line here, if yours doesn't look exactly like mine does because you put it on a different spot in the canvas, or because it might be a little bit longer, that's okay. So long as when you zoom in, you can tell it's just 1 pixel wide. It shouldn't be any bigger than 1 pixel wide. So we'll zoom out here. And once again, with this layer selected, I'm going to hold down the Control and the Shift key, and I'm just going to press the down button. Oops, Control Shift. Well, first off, let's have the Move tool selected, and then we'll do that. Control Shift and then down. Okay, Alt Shift down. Sorry. Okay, so Alt Shift and down, and it'll create these little repeating lines. It'll just create a bunch of layers. You can see that my layer menu is populating with a bunch of different layers. So I'm just going to hold down, and it's going to disappear for a second, and it'll all reappear. Boop, magic. Okay, so this creates a bunch of lines for us here. So I'm just going to hold down. I'm just click at the top layer here. I'm going to scroll down, hold down Shift, and select the bottommost layer before the background. And just right click, and I'm just going to say merge layers. So I'll have this one layer here. I'm just going to rename it, just call it layer 1. So I don't have the little copy there, it's going to confuse me later. Okay, so we want to select a swatch. A swatch is just any pattern that you might have. or rather a sort of example that you would use to form a repeating pattern. So if ever you had like a carpet, that had a repeating pattern, you would look at the swatches, right? If you've been to a hotel and you see this little repeating pattern carpets they have, we need to select a swatch out of this. So we're going to zoom in real close until we can kind of see the sort of peaks of the lines. We can kind of see the pixels forming here. So I'm zoomed into about 800%. And I want to select a point that's right in the dead center. Sorry, no, at 3200%. Right in the dead center of this little line here. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to get my little marquee select tool, and I'm just going to select everything around this little peak here. And then I'm going to hit my my move tool, which is going to give me little transform tools. Now, if you don't have this already, let's go ahead and hit the view button, and where it says snap, make sure snap is checked, and go ahead and make sure all is checked. Like everything here is checked: guides, grids, layers, slices, all that stuff. So we're going to create a little. We're going to bring in a little guide here. The guide is going to be, just this little blue line that's going to be hanging out here. It's kind of hard to see here, but I'm going to zoom out. Right, so there's my first little line there. I'm going to zoom in a good deal, make sure I'm keeping that in view. And I'm just going to go over to the next peak here. So I'm just kind of following along until I find the next peak, right about there. And I'm going to zoom in real close to this as well. And once again, I want to be able to see, the pixels of this little peak here, right? So once again, I'm going to select this. I just, take my little marquee select tool and just selecting the whole thing. Hit the move tool there, so the transform controls. If you can't see the transform controls, make sure the transform control box is clicked up there. And I'm just going to take my little guide, and it's going to snap to right there. It'll be easy to see that with the pixel view. I'll just deselect, Control D, deselect there, and zoom out. And then what we want to do is we want to bring down our sort of guides for the tops and bottoms of our swatch here. So I'm going to pull in here. Then I'm just going to drag this down until it meets the pixels at the top here, just as close as you can to get that right there. Right? And then I'll do the same thing. I'll hit the top of another one, but I want to make sure I'm selecting somewhat of a square shape. So I'm going to zoom out slightly so I can see my transform. Like I can see my my guides here. Okay, so I can kind of see my guides there. This is probably tripping you out a little bit with the eyes because it's such a tight pattern. But I'll just pull this down until I get about a square pattern right about there, and I'll zoom in to make sure that this thing is lined up right. And we line up. We can move the guides by hitting the guide tool or the move tool, and just hovering over the line. We can kind of pull it down a little bit so it's right about there. If it's in a perfect square, it's okay. Okay, so with our little selection made here, with our little swatch created, before we do anything more, we're going to create our different sort of shadows. This is going to become a pattern later on. We're going to use this to be the pattern that we're going to use to engrave our dollar bill portrait here. So I'm going to go to my layer menu, and I'm going to right-click and duplicate this layer. And I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times here. So I've got layer 1 copy, layer 1 copy 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you have, all told, we have 6 layers. We have 6 copies of this. We have layer 1, and then we have 6 copies here. Actually, I think yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so we'll just have we have 7 apparently. Yes. So we have these here. Well, let's get rid of the last one. I think we need 6. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, yes, we need one. That'd be what we just did. Oops. Right, so we have 6. All right, so we've got 6 all told. And what we want to do is we want to thicken each of these lines here. So we're going to thicken them not by doing anything to the lines themselves. We're just going to right-click on them, and we're going to find where it says blending option. So right-click, so we have layer 1. We'll keep that the way it is. We'll go to layer 1 copy, and I'm going to right-click on it and go to blending options. And we want to apply a stroke. So we have a series of blending options we can use here, and we'll explore all of them as the year goes by. But click on stroke, and we're going to apply a stroke. Make sure that color is set to black. Make sure fill type is color. Make sure the opacity is set to 100. Make sure the blend mode is normal. Make sure the position is set to center. And let's just stroke one pixel. And so that way, zoom in, it'll thicken up a little bit. Let's see if we can't pull this in slightly here. And you notice now this little area here is a bit thicker from before. And we'll just hold on to this little spot here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to hit stroke, and this time I'm going to stroke with 2. Right, same deal. Double click. Don't double click on the name, double click on the gray. And then once again, stroke, and I'll change it to 3. And just repeat that. Stroke 4. And then finally, stroke 5. Okay. So, with all that done, let's zoom out and see if we can't find where our guides meet, and we're going to crop this down just to that. So let's see if we can't zoom out and find what we're looking for here. There it is, right there. Where all the guides kind of meet in the center. And we're just going to get our crop tool here, and we're just see if we can't snap it to the guides. And this might be difficult to see on here just by virtue of how the lines are all clashing. So do your best to make sure that everything is sort of snapped to the guides. Let me just zoom in. Oh, we can't really zoom in here. I'll zoom in this way. I'll go from 200 to 400. Right, so now what we can do is we can make sure these are snapped to. That's snapped right there. That's good. If for whatever reason you cannot make this form into a rectangle, it's possible you need to go up here where it says ratio. You might say original ratio. Just click up here to ratio, in which case it'll allow you to change the ratio to something other than a perfect square, because this was originally a perfect square, but I did the ratio wrong when I made this. But that's okay. That's fine. All right. So now you notice the guides are kind of pushing through the center of this line because we've expanded it out 5 pixels on either side. That's okay. All right. So once you have it all, lined up, you have it all connected to the. Okay, well, we'll just press Enter and give that a second to think. All right, and then we'll have this little swatch cropped out. See that it's all just down to that. Now let's go over here to our layer menu. Let's select. Let's hold down the Shift key and let's select all the copies that have the effect on it. So make sure they're all selected. And let's right-click on these and let's go ahead and just sort of finalize these changes we made by rasterizing them. If you recall from last year, rasterizing means that it's just a series of pixels. In this case, this is an effect. So it would change based on changes we made to the thing. So if I were to erase a little bit of it, the original thing, then the whole thing would change. So it's important that we finalize those. So we have these little copies here. So once again, let's get all the layers invisible here. And this is where we're going to do some kind of inner working stuff. Much in the same way we made our actions, we have these little functions. We're going to create a pattern that we can then use with the bucket tool. So I'm going to go ahead and activate layer 1, just make sure I can see that. And I'm going to go over here to Edit. I'm going to go to Define Pattern. And let's name it something. Don't worry about what's going on over here. It looks like it's a flat little line. Don't worry about that. Let's call it AV Lab $1 or something to that effect. You could just call it $1 if you wanted to, or whatever, call it, name it after yourself. So $1 and press OK. All right. Now we can just sort of make sure that we did that right by going to our bucket tool. Now once again, if you don't see a paint bucket sitting here, just press G on the keyboard and you should see something light up. It might be the gradient tool, but the paint bucket's there. So if you click on where it says foreground and you click on pattern, you should see the thing you just made. So I made this earlier, And let's look here, $1 right there. That's great. Okay, so we'll just kind of bring that off to the side here. Let's go ahead and make sure we have the move tool selected so we don't accidentally push anything with that paint bucket tool. So I'll make layer 1 invisible. I'll find layer 1 copy, and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to edit, define pattern. And this time I'll call it $2. So keep track of where you're at. So layer 1 was $1. Layer 1 copy will be $2. Okay, I'll make that invisible, make the next one visible here, and we'll just repeat this pattern. So with layer 1 copy 2, or however you might have named it, if this is the third level up, we're going to go to edit, define pattern, and this is going to be $3, or however you're naming it. I'm just going to continue on with this. All right, I'll just make that invisible, make the next one up. This is layer 1 copy 3. This is the fourth one here, so once again, edit, define pattern, $4. Okay, make that invisible. Alright, I'll make layer 1 copy 4 visible here, edit, define pattern. This is going to be $5. Press OK. Okay, make that invisible. Make the final one here, and we'll just go to edit, define pattern, $6. Okay. All right. So let's test this out. I'm going to make a new file, and I'll just create a random file here. I can go from the clipboard. That's fine. And I'll just hit my pattern tool here, my paint bucket here. Make sure it's set to pattern, and you can select one of the $ ones we just made. So if I select $1, I just press go, you can see we have these little wavy lines, right? If I go to $6, oops, let's make a new layer here. They get even darker, right? So that worked out fine. That's great. Okay, good. So I'll just undo that. Okay, so find an image you want to make into your dollar. Now I found this image of 90s rapper, rap legend, Notorious B.I.G. So I'm going to do this with him. I thought this would look fine. This would be a good example even with the little bars on the sides. And I'm going to have him be my sort of image here. So what we want to do is whatever you open up, so pause the video. And if you want to just find a picture that you like, it doesn't have to be very big. It could be, or it could be one of the ones that we took. I would say, if you want to keep this somewhere around the 1,000 to 2,000 pixel wide range. So some of those pictures we took with the DSLR cameras were about 4,000 pixels wide. So if you have some of those, kind of scale them down a bit, or maybe some of those prom pictures you took. But you'll see what we're going to do in a second. Because think about like minimalism, think about the negative space and stuff. Precisely what's going to happen here. So I'm going to duplicate these. This right here. I'm going to duplicate this 5 times. Because we had 6 of those little patterns, six of those engraving patterns, and we're going to have 6 of these layers because we're going to have levels of shadows that we do. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer. Okay. I'll just keep duplicating this. So I get 6 total. So I want to. So the last one is going to be called layer 1 copy 5. Alright, so I have 6 of these. I got layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so once again, you have your own image because you don't have this image on your computer. You have your own image that you want to use. So go ahead and find your image, and while you do that, make sure that you have 6 of these layers duplicated here. And then I'm going to make 6 layers above this. So I'll just click this button here to make 6 layers. All right, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just do this. Let's go ahead and go to image, and we've done image size before, but let's find canvas size. So canvas size basically just changes the area. In most cases, it'll fill it with either the alpha channel or it'll fill it with whatever the background is. In this case, it'll be white. So if you look over here, our background's white. So in this case, we have our background color. We're just going to go. We'll change this this value here from whatever it's at. If it's in inches or pixels, change it to percent. And so if relative is checked, you can uncheck it. So right now it's at 100%. Let's just change it to 200%, and make sure both the height and the width are set to 200%. So I'll just press OK, and then it'll expand everything out a little bit. But keep your images the same. But we're going to fill in the layers here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just make all these. Actually, before I do anything, let's do this. This is an important step here. So let's go ahead and make all the layers that you had copied invisible, except for layer 1. And with layer 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to Image, Adjustments, and find Threshold. And your threshold, I think, is set to the center at about like 128. Let's go ahead and change it to 60. Okay. And we're going to go up in intervals of 20. So there's 60, and then there's Image, Adjustments, Threshold. So we had 60, and then we're going to have 80. Okay, and then we'll have Image, Adjustments. I have 100 now. And even if this is looking kind of unclear, like not really sure what this is achieving here, think to yourself, we're talking about the different shadows. So we're trying to increase the intensity of the shadows for the various kind of engraving we're going to do. Adjustments, threshold, 120. Okay. We have image, adjustments, threshold, 160, no, 140. Okay, did I do that right? Okay, yeah. Right, and then finally 160. Last will be image, adjustments, threshold, 160. So even if you have a whole lot of shadows like I do, it's okay because you're gonna you'll find it's gonna be a little you'll find that it'll make sense once you see the effect here. All right, so I'm gonna make all these invisible here below my empty layers, and let's go up to the top here with layer 7. And let's start at the bottom. Let's start with layer 2. So at the very bottom here, I'm going to call this highlights. Okay, so go ahead and rename that highlights, and select your bucket tool. Make sure it's set to pattern. And if you don't see what I see here, you can click this little gear box, and you can call it large list or small list. I call it small list just so I can see the names. Make sure you find $1. And go ahead and fill highlights with $1. So if you zoom in close, you can see we have our little pattern there. Right? Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll go to the next layer here. We'll call this light tones. What was light shade? Right? And we'll fill this with $2. We'll name this next one. We'll also name this light shade. And we'll fill this one with $3. Okay, find layer 5. Okay, and we'll go to, we'll call this dark shade. And we'll fill this with $4. We'll call layer 6 dark shade as well. And we'll fill this with $5. And then we'll call layer 7, we'll call this one shadows. And we'll fill this up with $6. Okay, great. Alright, so let's go ahead and make everything invisible. And let's go down to layer 1. So this was the kind of lightest one with the most detail here. And let's go ahead and go to select color range. And instead of, if you have it to sampled colors, you could select black, but it's easier just to do shadows, because shadows will automatically select all the darkest areas here, right? So all the white stuff is going to be down here, all the white stuff is going to be selected. So I didn't change anything from the fuzziness. This is set to 20% and 65. So it doesn't really matter because it's either black or white. So there's going to be a whole lot of difference here. But I'll press OK, and you'll see these marching ants here. And I'm going to go over here to my highlights, and I'm going to, okay, wait, let's back it up here. Let's Control D for just a second. I forgot a step here. Let's go ahead and take away layer 1, and let's do this. Let's take our dark shade here. Let's take both of our dark shades. Let's select both of them. Hold down Shift, select both of them, and press V on your keyboard. And let's rotate these 90 degrees. So if we click on the little controls out here, once again, make sure Transform Controls is selected. Hold down Shift, and you can see that it's rotating it 9 degrees, like so. Right? So let's just do that. And if this does not, if this like cuts off your picture, that's okay. In this case, this is going to be a little bit different here, and we'll do the same thing to highlights, except for instead of rotating it 9 degrees, we're going to rotate it 45 degrees. So once again, I'm just going to click on highlights, and I'm going to rotate this. Hold down Shift once, twice, thrice, and we'll have it 45 degrees here. It doesn't matter which direction you do it in. If you go up 45 degrees or if you go down 45 degrees, so long as it's at an angle kind of oblique to everything else. Press Enter, make that invisible. Alright, so once again, make layer 1 visible. Let me just make sure I can see everything. Alright, go to your select color range, and then go to shadows, press OK, you'll see the marching ants. And let's go ahead and click on highlights. No, let's click on shadows. We'll start at the top and the bottom, we'll work our way to the middle. And down here, make sure shadows, the layer is selected. There's a button that's called layer mask, add layer mask. Adding a layer mask basically just does the sort of non-destructive alterations to the layer itself. So in this case, it's going to obscure everything that's not selected. So I'll press that button that says add layer mask, and everything disappears. It doesn't seem like anything changed until you take away layer 1. And you see that the pattern is now there for layer 1. And we'll keep doing that. I'm going to go to the next one here, layer 1 copy. And I'm going to once again go to select color range, and I still have shadows selected. I'll press OK. See more marching ants. I'll go to my first dark shade layer here, and I'll just add my layer mask. And once I take away layer 1 copy, you can see there's a little bit of a pattern there. That's good. And then what we'll do is we'll go to layer 1 copy 2. We'll do the same thing. Select color range, shadows, okay. We'll go to our dark shade, our other dark shade layer. We'll hit our layer mask. We'll make that invisible. We're starting to see some more detail coming in. That's neat, right? And then what we'll do is we'll go to our next layer here. Let's figure out what was that? It's 3. So we go up 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Next one is layer 3, layer 1, copy 3. Select color range, shadows, okay. We'll select our light shade, make that visible, put on the layer mask. We'll pull this down here and see what we're looking at. See, it's starting to come out. You can see you're starting to see a little bit of the of the sort of hopeful pattern here. So we've got 2 there, we've got 2 here. I'll make layer 1, copy 4 visible. I'll go to select color range. Okay. Get my light shade here. Add a layer mask. Now we got invisible, and then we'll finish it out with the highlights here. Select color range, shadows, okay, and we'll go to highlights, and we'll select our layer mask here. Alright, and so now what we've got is this fun little pattern here that you can still see the lines, everything, but you know, with a certain, if you back it up a certain amount, you can actually see a good deal of of detail here. Now, what's fun about this is that if we wanted to add maybe some more like kind of detail to our engraving pattern here, I could just unlink the masks from their layers, and I could actually alter, like, so for instance, would basically the mask would still remain, but everything around it could change, everything underneath it, everything that was masked could change. So I could just select everything here, hold down Shift and select all these layers, everything selected, and then hit the Move tool, hit V on the keyboard, and let's make sure I'm zoomed out enough so I can see everything here. And I can actually pull this down slightly. Oops. Let's make sure that we're going down the center here. As if I hold down Control, it'll go from the center. No. Put Alt. Yeah, Alt from the center. Hold down Shift and Alt, and just make sure that nothing is lost on the edges here. And then we can zoom in. You can see like the pattern is now a little bit tighter. It's a little more intricate. Okay, so I thought, did I miss something? I think I missed something. No, I didn't. That's fine. Alright, good. Okay, so with that done, I'll just crop this down to right here. Press Enter. And let's actually crop it down to where it's not, there's a little gap at the top there. And then what we'll do is we'll add a new layer at the very top, and we'll fill it with like a dark green. So let's change our from pattern to foreground, and with our bucket tool selected, let's change our foreground color just to like a dark, like dollar green here. So not like an olive green, but like just a normal green, sort of a dark green here. And we'll just fill that up with this dark green here. Is this a grayscale? It's image mode, RGB color. That's fine. And I'll add a new layer here. Mine was already black and white, it was already grayscale image, so. But I'll just set my mode, or my color mode, to color. Down here. Which sort of will kind of shade all the non-white elements of it. So then we have our little dollar portrait here. Alright, so very good. So you would do this with your own image, with the one that you chose, hopefully one that you took a picture of, that you took. You could go ahead and find something else if you wanted to use it. That's fine. But this is a neat little way of making a fun little effect on your image to make it look like a dollar, like the sort of a dollar engraving here, and maybe different, more detailed images. Obviously we'll have more detail, and the effect will be, noticeable in different ways. So it'll be really cool to see what you guys produce. All right, well, very good. See you in class.